shadows have been whispering, and they've brought us to this moment. Void of Fears has grown to over 8,500 subscribers. We're now less than 1,500 away from our goal. Every like pulls the darkness closer. Every comment feeds what waits beyond the veil. Every subscription brings us one step nearer to completion. Tonight's nightmare awaits. Are you ready to face what hides in the void? The moon had always called to me. Even as a child, I would stare up at that pale orb hanging in the night sky and feel something pull at my soul. It wasn't until I was standing on its surface, feeling the crunch of regolith beneath my boots, that I realized the moon had been waiting for me all along. My name is Dr. Alex Morgan, and I'm a geologist specializing in extraterrestrial mineralogy. When NASA expanded the Artemis program to establish a permanent research station in 2023, I submitted my application without a second thought. 3 years and countless qualification rounds later, I found myself assigned to Artemis Forward Base, a 6-person research station nestled on the rim of Shackleton Crater near the lunar South Pole. Life on the moon settled into a strange rhythm. The 2-week lunar days of harsh, unfiltered sunlight followed by 2 weeks of star-studded darkness. The constant background hum of life support systems. The light-delayed video calls with family back on Earth. We were pioneers, but much of our work was methodical and routine, collecting samples, running experiments, maintaining equipment. That all changed on April 15th, 2026. I was monitoring the deep scanning equipment when it happened. We'd been running a standard geological survey, mapping subsurface density across the crater floor. The readings had been consistent with our expectations until the scanner picked up something unusual. A perfectly symmetrical void, approximately 3 kilometers beneath the surface. "Commander Wilson, you need to see this," I called out, my voice betraying more excitement than I intended. Wilson glided over in the moon's gentle gravity, her movements practiced and efficient after 18 months on the lunar surface. "What am I looking at, Morgan?" she asked, her eyes narrowing at the screen. "This density anomaly. It's too uniform to be natural. And look at these readings. The surrounding material shows traces of processed metals." She studied the data for a long moment. "Could be an instrument error. I've already run 3 calibration checks. This is real." The next 12 hours were a flurry of activity. We ran every remote scanning protocol in the book, confirming and reconfirming our findings before sending the data package back to Houston. The response came faster than expected. A priority communication from NASA Director Hammond himself. "Your team is authorized to conduct a preliminary investigation. Approach with extreme caution. Document everything. If you encounter anything that appears technological in nature, do not attempt to interact with it without first consulting Mission Control." We prepared meticulously. Equipment checks, rover modifications, backup systems, emergency protocols. Our team of 6 would split. Wilson, Dr. Patel, and Engineer Rodriguez would remain at base as our lifeline, while myself, Dr. Kyoko Tanaka, our physicist, and Commander James Powell would venture to the site. The journey across the lunar landscape in our modified rover took nearly 6 hours. We travelled in relative silence, each lost in our own thoughts about what we might discover. The terrain was familiar yet alien. Rolling grey hills, sharp-edged craters, and the ever-present stars above, unblinking without an atmosphere to make them twinkle. As we approached the coordinates, our communications with base began deteriorating. "Forward Base, this is Exploration Team. We're experiencing signal degradation. Please acknowledge." Powell's voice was calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Exploration Team, we're getting increased static on our end as well." Wilson's voice crackled through the speakers, switching to backup frequencies. The switch didn't help. Within minutes we were in communication blackout, with only emergency channels functioning intermittently. It's some kind of localized electromagnetic interference, Tanaka said, studying her instruments, strongest directly ahead of us. We crested a small ridge, and Powell stopped the rover abruptly. Below us stretched a small valley, unremarkable except for one feature, a perfectly smooth black material protruding from the grey lunar soil. "My God," I whispered. The exposed section was perhaps 30 feet across, its surface so dark it seemed to absorb the light from our headlamps. No lunar dust rested on its surface despite the surrounding regolith, as if the material somehow repelled the fine particles. We approached cautiously, instruments extended before us. Every reading defied explanation. The material registered no temperature, reflected no radiation, and seemed to possess a density that fluctuated when observed. "This isn't natural," Tanaka said unnecessarily, "and it's definitely not human technology." Powell circled the exposed section, his footprints creating a perimeter around the anomaly. The surface area appears larger than what our scans indicated. I think much of it is still buried. I knelt and carefully brushed away the regolith at the edge of the black material. As more of it was exposed, I noticed something that stopped my breath. What appeared to be seams or edges, geometric patterns too precise to be anything but artificial. "It's a structure," I said. "We're looking at a corner of a much larger construction." 4 hours of careful excavation revealed what could only be described as an entrance, a rectangular depression in the otherwise seamless surface. No visible handles, hinges, or control mechanisms. Just a perfect inset rectangle approximately 7 feet tall. "We should wait for instructions from base," Powell said, but his voice lacked conviction. We all knew communications were completely down, and the discovery was too significant to simply walk away from. Tanaka approached the rectangle, her hand hovering over its surface. "There's an energy signature, weak but present." "Don't," I started to say, but her fingers had already made contact. The effect was immediate and impossible. The black rectangle simply vanished, revealing a perfectly dark opening into the structure. No sound, no movement, just sudden absence where solid material had been. Powell's training took over. Full suit integrity check. Activate secondary oxygen supplies, headlamps at maximum. We stood at the threshold of something that shouldn't exist, our headlamp beams swallowed by the darkness beyond. That was when I first felt it, a subtle but unmistakable sensation of being watched. "Base needs to know about this," Powell said, his voice steady but strained. "Morgan, set up the relay beacon. If we can't communicate directly, we'll leave breadcrumbs." I deployed the small transmitter, programming it to broadcast our findings in compressed bursts that might pierce through the interference. As I worked, Tanaka and Powell conducted preliminary scans of the opening. "No atmosphere inside," Powell reported. "Temperature stable at -20 Celsius. "That's 15 degrees warmer than it should be," Tanaka noted, her voice betraying her unease. With the beacon established, we faced the entrance again. Protocol dictated we should wait, establish communication, receive clear authorization. But we all knew this moment transcended protocol. This was potentially the most significant discovery in human history. "We go in," Powell decided. "Standard exploration formation. 10 minutes only, then we retreat and attempt to re-establish communication." The moment we crossed the threshold, our headlamps revealed a corridor stretching ahead, the walls, floor and ceiling made of the same light-absorbing black material. Despite millions of years exposed to the lunar environment, no dust had penetrated beyond the entrance. The corridor was pristine, as if it had been sealed just moments before our arrival. "The architecture is designed for bipedal beings approximately our size," Tanaka observed, her scientific mind grasping for familiar concepts to contextualize the impossible. The corridor extended perhaps 50 meters before opening into a larger chamber, As we entered this space, subtle illumination began to emanate from the walls themselves, a soft blue glow that strengthened until the entire chamber was dimly lit. Motion or presence sensors, Powell suggested, though his tone carried little confidence. The chamber contained what appeared to be workstations, curved surfaces emerging from the floor, with indentations that looked unsettlingly like they were designed for human hands. "This can't be coincidence," I said, moving toward one of the stations. "These are proportioned for human use." Powell held up a warning hand. "No contact with anything yet. We document only..." Tanaka was circling the perimeter, her instruments scanning continuously. There's a consistent energy signature throughout the structure, very faint but increasing since we entered. The longer we remained, the more details emerged. The chamber connected to additional rooms through doorless archways. The architecture featured recurring patterns that seemed almost familiar, yet just beyond recognition. Most disturbing were the proportions, everything scaled to comfortably accommodate human beings. 10 minutes are up, Powell announced. "We head back, report what we've found." None of us moved. "Did you hear me? We need to go back." His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. "Commander," Tanaka said softly, "look at these markings." Along one wall, barely visible in the dim blue light, were inscriptions, not alien symbols, but what appeared to be a form of proto-language, with elements that resembled ancient human writing systems. "This is impossible," I whispered, approaching the wall. "This structure predates human civilization by millions of years." Powell checked his oxygen levels, a nervous habit I'd noticed whenever he felt control slipping. "We're leaving. Now." We reluctantly retreated to the entrance, our minds struggling to process what we'd seen. Upon reaching the surface, we discovered the beacon had failed. No signals had been transmitted to base. "We need to report this directly," Powell decided. "Back to the rover." The drive back to Artemis Forward Base was tense, each of us lost in speculation. Tanaka's instruments had recorded everything, and we had hours of footage to analyze, but the implications were so profound that words failed us. Commander Wilson was waiting as we docked the rover to the airlock. Her expression told me she'd been worried sick after losing contact. "What happened out there?" she demanded, once we were inside. Powell hesitated, uncharacteristically struggling for words. "We found evidence of intelligent design." The entire team gathered in the command center as we shared our findings. The footage was clear, the sensor readings unmistakable. Whatever we had discovered was artificial, ancient, and inexplicably designed with human proportions. "We need to go back," Dr. Patel insisted after reviewing everything. "This changes everything we know about human origins." Wilson was more cautious. "We follow protocol. Full report to Earth. Wait for instructions." But when we attempted to transmit our findings, we encountered an unexpected problem. The main communication array had gone offline. During our absence, Rodriguez had been working to restore it without success. "The timing can't be coincidence," Tanaka said, verbalizing what we were all thinking. That night, unable to sleep, I reviewed the footage on my personal tablet. Something about the inscriptions nagged at me. I enhanced and isolated the images, comparing them with linguistics databases. The results chilled me to the core. Certain elements matched Sumerian cuneiform, others resembled Proto-Sinaitic script. These were Earth languages, or at least their ancient predecessors. By morning, Wilson had made her decision. "We can't wait for communications to be restored. This discovery is too important. We're going back, all of us, except Rodriguez. We'll stay to fix the comms." The return journey was faster now that we knew the route. This time, the entire team, except Rodriguez, ventured inside the structure. With 5 of us exploring, we covered more ground, discovering additional chambers branching off the main room. Patel found what appeared to be living quarters spaces with platforms reminiscent of beds, storage areas, and what might have been food preparation facilities. Wilson discovered a room filled with cylindrical containers, each approximately 2 meters tall, arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. But it was Tanaka who made the most significant discovery, a chamber that could only be described as an archive. The walls were lined with crystalline objects embedded in the black material, each glowing faintly when approached. Some kind of data storage, she theorized, carefully scanning without touching. I was drawn to a raised dais in the center of this room, upon which rested a single object, a black cube approximately 30 centimeters on each side. Unlike everything else we'd encountered, this cube wasn't seamless. It had visible seams, as if designed to be opened. "Dr. Morgan, don't approach further," Wilson called out, but her voice seemed distant, muffled. My hand moved toward the cube of its own accord. Some part of my mind screamed warning, but a stronger compulsion drove me forward. My gloved fingertips made contact with the smooth surface. The world exploded into visions. I saw Earth as it was millions of years ago. I saw cities that rivaled anything in our modern world, technology beyond our comprehension. I saw humans, undeniably humans, living, working, advancing, and I saw them looking to the stars with growing fear. They came to the moon, not as explorers, but as refugees. They built outposts, observation stations, listening posts. They watched and waited for something approaching from deep space, something they had accidentally summoned through their technological advancement. The visions shifted. I saw the moon base being sealed, its occupants entering what appeared to be stasis chambers. I saw the final messages being recorded, warnings for future generations should humanity rise again. Then, darkness. Waiting. Endless waiting. I felt myself collapsing, strong hands catching me before I hit the floor. Powell's voice, urgent and distant. "Morgan! Morgan, can you hear me?" When my vision cleared, I saw the entire team gathered around me, their expressions masked by their helmets but their body language conveying their concern. "What happened?" Wilson demanded. "They were human," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "They were us, an advanced human civilization millions of years ago. They came here running from something." Skepticism was evident in Wilson's stance, but Patel moved closer. "What do you mean, something?" Before I could answer, a low vibration began to emanate through the structure. The blue illumination brightened, and previously invisible doorways revealed themselves along the chamber walls. "The structure is activating," Tanaka said, her instruments frantically capturing data, power signatures increasing exponentially. Wilson's command training took over. "Everyone out, now." "Wait!" I struggled to my feet. "There's more we need to know. The central chamber. There's something there they wanted us to find." "That wasn't a request, Doctor," Wilson snapped. "We're leaving." But Tanaka was already moving towards one of the newly revealed doorways. "This leads deeper. The energy signature is strongest this way." Despite Wilson's orders, we found ourselves following Tanaka down a spiraling corridor that descended further beneath the lunar surface. The vibrations grew stronger, and I felt a pressure building in my sinuses, as if the air density was fluctuating despite our sealed suits. The corridor opened into a vast circular chamber, easily 100 meters across. The walls were lined with what appeared to be stasis pods, most damaged or decayed beyond recognition. But in the center stood a single intact pod, a transparent covering revealing its occupant. The figure inside was unmistakably human, a man, his features refined but recognizable, his body preserved in perfect stasis. He wore a close-fitting uniform of unfamiliar design, and a device was attached to his temple. "My God," Patel breathed, "proof of advanced human civilization, predating all known history." The vibrations suddenly intensified. Several pods along the walls cracked open, releasing a fine mist that dissipated in the vacuum. Warning lights I hadn't noticed before began pulsing along the ceiling. "We've triggered something," Wilson said, backing towards the entrance. "Everyone out, final warning." This time no one argued. We retreated up the spiral corridor, the vibrations now strong enough to make footing treacherous. As we reached the main archive chamber, Tanaka's scanner emitted a sharp alarm. "Energy surge," she called out. "Something's powering up beneath us." We ran for the exit, the structure now humming with awakening systems. As we reached the surface, a shockwave rippled through the LUNAR Regolith, knocking Powell off his feet. I helped him up, all of us staggering toward the rover. Behind us, the black surface of the structure was now fully exposed. Lunar dust repelled by some invisible force. Lines of blue light traced patterns across its surface, converging toward what appeared to be an antenna array rising from the center. "It's transmitting," Tanaka said, her voice filled with dread, "broadcasting a signal outward." We piled into the rover, Wilson taking the controls and pushing the engines beyond safe parameters. Behind us, the ground continued to shake, fissures opening in the lunar surface. "Artemis Base, do you copy?" Wilson called repeatedly, but only static answered. The journey back was a nightmare of navigating increasingly unstable terrain. Twice we nearly tipped over, and once a chasm opened directly in our path, forcing a lengthy detour. All the while, Tanaka's instruments recorded the strengthening signal emanating from the structure, broadcasting directionally away from Earth, out towards the distant stars. When we finally reached Artemis Forward Base, we found Rodriguez unconscious beside the communications array. After reviving him, he reported experiencing severe headaches, followed by hallucinations, before passing out. "Something was in my head," he insisted, "searching for information." The base systems were in disarray, life support functioning, but environmental controls fluctuating wildly, and still no communication with Earth was possible. Through the viewport, we watched as flashes of blue light erupted from the direction of the structure. Using the base's telescope, we observed with horror as the entire site transformed. The black material had completely shed its covering of regolith, revealing a complex that sprawled across several acres. The antenna array now stood fully extended, a twisting spire reaching toward the stars. "We need to leave," Wilson decided. "Prep the ascent vehicle. We're evacuating." "We can't just abandon everything," Patel argued. "This discovery will kill us if we stay," Wilson cut him off. "That facility is broadcasting to something, and I don't think we want to be here when whatever it is answers." As we prepared for emergency departure, I downloaded all our findings onto portable drives. The structure had revealed only a fraction of its secrets, but what we'd learned was world-changing. Humanity had risen before, achieved greatness, and then fallen, perhaps deliberately hiding itself from something in the cosmos. The moonquakes intensified as we completed preparations. Through the telescope, I took one final look at the facility. The antenna had changed configuration, now rotating slowly, as if searching across the heavens. And around the perimeter, figures moved, not humans in spacesuits, but something else, something that moved with mechanical precision. "They're coming this way," I reported, my mouth dry with fear. Wilson expedited our departure timeline. "Everyone in the ascent vehicle, now." We launched amid violent tremors, the ascent rougher than any simulation had prepared us for. As we broke free of the lunar surface, I looked back at our abandoned base. Already the figures had reached it, their nature impossible to discern at our rapidly increasing distance. The journey back to Earth took 3 days, during which we organized our findings and prepared our report. What would we tell them? That human history was millions of years longer than anyone had imagined. That an advanced civilization had once fled from something, hiding themselves on Earth while leaving watchers on the moon. As we approached Earth orbit, we finally established communication with Mission Control. Artemis forward, this is Houston. We've been trying to reach you for days. What's your status? Wilson took a deep breath before responding. Houston, Artemis forward. We are declaring a full emergency. The base has been compromised. We have made contact with evidence of intelligent activity on the lunar surface. There was a long pause before Houston responded. Understood, Artemis. You are cleared for emergency landing procedures. Be advised that your debriefing will be handled by special protocols. Something in their tone made my skin crawl. As if they weren't surprised, as if they'd been waiting for this moment. We landed in the Pacific Ocean as planned, but instead of the usual recovery vessels, we were met by an unmarked ship staffed by personnel who wore no NASA insignia. We were separated immediately, each taken to isolation quarters. My debriefing lasted 3 days. The questions were exhaustive, detailed, familiar, as if they already knew what we had found and merely sought confirmation. I told them everything, from the initial discovery to the final moments before our evacuation. On the 4th day, the door to my isolation room opened, and a man in a civilian suit entered. He introduced himself only as Director Carson. Dr. Morgan, I want to thank you for your service. What you and your team discovered on the moon is, indeed, significant. When can I speak with the others? I asked. When will our findings be published? He smiled thinly. I'm afraid that won't be possible. The information you've brought back is classified at the highest level. You can't suppress this. The public has a right to know about human origins. This isn't the first time we've found evidence of the previous civilization, Dr. Morgan. He interrupted calmly. There have been discoveries on Earth, deep excavations in Antarctica, certain caves in South Africa, structures beneath the Mediterranean that defy conventional dating methods. I stared at him speechless. What you experienced, the signal being broadcast from the lunar facility, has happened before. Each time we've managed to contain the situation. This time, he paused, his expression grave. This time the signal was transmitted for nearly 12 hours before your team evacuated, long enough to reach its destination. What destination? What was it broadcasting to? Carson looked away, his composure cracking slightly. We don't know exactly, but based on previous discoveries, we believe the previous civilization was fleeing from something they encountered during early interstellar exploration, something that followed them back. They hid themselves, devolved deliberately, scattered their knowledge in secure facilities across the solar system. They left watchers and warning systems. You activated one such system. A cold dread settled in my stomach. What happens now? You'll be relocated to a secure facility. Your expertise will be valuable in the coming months. We're accelerating certain defense programs that have been in development since the first discoveries in the 1960s. Defense against what? Carson moved to leave but paused at the door. When you touched that cube, Dr. Morgan, did you see them? The ones that came from beyond? I hadn't told anyone about that part of the vision, the glimpse of something vast and incomprehensible, moving between the stars, drawn by humanity's first faster-than-light experiments. They're still out there, Carson said, reading my expression, and thanks to that activated beacon, they now know that humanity has re-emerged, that we're back to a level of technology that makes us interesting to them again. He left me alone with that terrible knowledge. 2 weeks after my initial debriefing, I was transferred to a facility deep in the Nevada desert. The compound was massive but entirely underground, with only a small administrative building visible on the surface. The security was unlike anything I'd seen before. Not just armed guards and biometric scanners, but strange devices that seemed to measure something beyond physical characteristics. They called it Project Lighthouse. When I first entered the main research area, I was stunned by its scale, a circular chamber, a quarter-mile across, filled with equipment that blended cutting-edge technology with components I couldn't begin to identify. "Welcome to humanity's last line of defense," said a familiar voice behind me. I turned to find Dr. Tanaka approaching, her face thinner than I remembered. Dark circles under her eyes. "Kyoko, thank God. Have you seen the others?" "Powell's here, working with the defense systems team. Patel is in the linguistics division. I haven't seen Wilson or Rodriguez." Before I could ask more, a tall woman in a white lab coat approached us. "Dr. Morgan, I'm Dr. Eleanor Reeves, Scientific Director of Lighthouse. We have much to discuss." She led us to a conference room where several other scientists waited, including Powell, who nodded grimly when I entered. On the table was a familiar object, the black cube from the lunar facility. "You retrieved it," I whispered. "Not this specific one," Reeves clarified. "This was found in Antarctica in 1991, beneath 2 miles of ice. It's one of 17 similar artifacts we've recovered worldwide." What followed was the most extraordinary briefing of my life. According to Reeves, evidence of the previous civilization had been discovered repeatedly throughout the 20th century, always hidden, always preserved in ways that defied explanation. The findings had been suppressed not out of malice or to control knowledge, but out of fear of what they consistently revealed. The previous civilization reached technological heights we've only begun to approach, Reeves explained. Space travel, biological engineering, practical immortality through consciousness transfer, but they made a critical mistake. Their first experiments with faster-than-light travel created ripples in space-time that acted as a beacon. They were noticed by something ancient that dwells in the void between galaxies. "What exactly are we talking about?" Powell asked, his military pragmatism asserting itself. "Alien invaders." Reeves shook her head. "Not in the conventional sense. From what we've pieced together, the previous civilization encountered entities that exist primarily in dimensions beyond our perception. These beings don't conquer in the way we understand conquest. They transform reality itself to better suit their existence." She brought up holographic displays showing what appeared to be ancient artwork from various cultures, all depicting similar abstract shapes hovering above terrified humans. "We believe the previous civilization fought a losing war against these entities. When they realized they couldn't win through conventional means, they implemented a drastic survival strategy. They deliberately regressed their own technological development, fragmented their society, and went into hiding. They seeded the solar system with warning systems and knowledge repositories, hoping that if humanity ever rose again, we might be better prepared." "And we just activated one of those warning systems," I said. "Yes, and more concerning, the lunar facility began broadcasting on frequencies we've seen before. It's calling them back." The implications were staggering. Our entire understanding of human history was wrong. We hadn't evolved from primitive ancestors. We were the descendants of a highly advanced civilization that had deliberately devolved to hide from a cosmic threat. Over the following months, I worked with Tanaka and dozens of other scientists to understand the technology left behind by our ancestors. The black cubes contained vast repositories of knowledge, not just scientific information, but historical records, cultural artifacts, and warnings. Accessing this knowledge was dangerous. Direct neural interfaces often led to psychological trauma, hallucinations, or worse. They designed these interfaces for brains that were accustomed to processing multi-dimensional information, Tanaka explained after one particularly grueling session. Our minds have evolved or devolved to filter reality more narrowly. While we studied the artifacts, the world above continued in blissful ignorance. Occasional news would filter down to us, strange astronomical phenomena, unexplained equipment failures at observatories, unusual aurora-like displays visible even during daylight. The public was told these were natural phenomena, but within Project Lighthouse we knew better. Something was approaching. 6 months after our lunar discovery, I was called to a special meeting with Director Carson and military officials I didn't recognize. They showed me images from our deep space monitoring stations. Something was distorting space itself at the edge of our solar system, creating ripples in the fabric of reality that our instruments could barely detect. "How long do we have?" I asked. Carson's expression was grim. "If current trajectories hold, first contact in approximately 8 months. And our defenses?" One of the military men spoke up. "We've adapted some of the previous civilization's technology. Dimensional anchors to stabilize our local space-time. Perception filters to shield key facilities from detection. But we're working with fragments of technology we barely understand." "There's something else," Carson added, sliding a tablet across the table to me. On the screen was an image from a telescope pointed at the moon. The lunar facility had expanded dramatically, now covering several square miles of the surface. But more disturbing were the new structures appearing around it. Towers, antennas, and what appeared to be launch platforms. "It's building," I whispered. "Not just building," Carson corrected. "It's awakening. We believe the facility contains dormant systems designed to activate when the threat returns. It may be our greatest asset or our greatest liability. We need someone to go back." The room fell silent. "You want me to return to the moon?" I said, not a question. "You've had direct contact with the technology. Your mind is partially adapted to interface with it. Our scientists believe you have the highest chance of successfully communicating with the facility's systems." I looked around the table at their expectant faces. "And if I refuse?" Carson's expression remained neutral. "Then we send someone else, with a significantly lower probability of success." The mission was planned for 3 months later, a covert launch using a vehicle developed within Project Lighthouse, technology decades ahead of anything publicly acknowledged. Our team would consist of 4 specialists: myself, Tanaka, an engineer named Dr. Victor Cohen, and a military escort, Major Lisa Blackwood. The night before our departure, I stood on the facility's observation deck, looking up at the moon. It appeared unchanged to the naked eye, but I knew better. Something ancient was stirring up there, preparing for a war that had been paused millions of years ago. Tanaka joined me, offering a cup of coffee. Couldn't sleep either. I shook my head. Every time I close my eyes, I see those visions again. Cities burning, skies filled with things that shouldn't exist in our reality. People transforming into something else. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "What we're doing, it might be the only chance humanity has. Or we might make things worse," I countered. "What if the facility is meant to be a beacon, not a defense? What if we're walking into a trap?" She had no answer for that. Our launch the next morning was conducted in absolute secrecy. The vehicle resembled no spacecraft I'd ever seen, with capabilities that defied conventional physics. We reached lunar orbit in hours rather than days, using propulsion systems reverse-engineered from previous civilization technology. As we approached the dark side of the moon, we got our first direct view of what the facility had become. It now dominated a vast area of the lunar surface, a sprawling complex of impossible structures that seemed to shift and change even as we watched. "It's not just building," Cohen observed, his voice hushed. "It's evolving." We landed a safe distance away using a stealth system that supposedly masked our presence from detection. As we stepped onto the lunar surface in our advanced suits, I felt a familiar sensation, that feeling of being watched, but now amplified 100-fold. "The approach will be dangerous," Blackwood briefed us. "Our intel suggests automated defenses have activated around the perimeter. We move carefully, stay together, and abort at the first sign of hostile action." We traversed the lunar landscape cautiously, each step methodical. The facility grew more imposing as we approached. Towers that defied Euclidean geometry, surfaces that seemed to absorb not just light but reality itself, and patterns etched into the structure that hurt the eyes to look at directly. Energy signatures are off the charts, Cohen reported, checking his instruments. Whatever it's doing, it's drawing power from somewhere beyond our understanding. We identified what appeared to be an entrance, not the same one we'd discovered initially, but a new opening that had formed as the structure expanded. The moment we approached, the black material parted, as if inviting us in. "It knows we're here," I said. "Trap?" Blackwood asked, weapon ready. "I don't think so. I think it's been waiting for us." We entered cautiously, our suit's external lights barely penetrating the darkness. Unlike before, the interior didn't illuminate as we advanced. We moved through corridors that twisted in ways that shouldn't have been possible, chambers that seemed larger inside than geometry would allow. "I'm losing orientation," Cohen admitted after 20 minutes. "My mapping systems can't reconcile the spatial inconsistencies." "Follow me," I said, surprised by my own confidence. "I know where we need to go." I couldn't explain how I knew, but some part of my mind had connected with the facility, guiding me through its impossible layout. The others followed, trusting me despite their evident unease. Eventually we reached a massive chamber that hadn't existed during our first exploration, a spherical space that seemed to contain its own gravitational field, allowing us to walk on any surface. At the center floated a complex apparatus that pulsed with blue-white energy. "This is it," Tanaka whispered. "The control nexus." As we approached, the apparatus reconfigured itself, extending what appeared to be an interface panel toward us. Without hesitation, I removed my glove, an action that should have been suicidal in the lunar vacuum. But somehow, I knew it was safe. The moment my bare hand touched the panel, my consciousness expanded outward. I was no longer just Alex Morgan. I was connected to the entire facility, accessing knowledge accumulated over millions of years. I saw the history of the previous civilization in its entirety, their rise, their golden age, their fatal error, and their desperate plan for survival. I saw the entities they had encountered, beings that existed primarily in dimensions we couldn't perceive, extending into our reality, like fingers dipping into a pond, rippling and distorting everything they touched. They didn't conquer worlds, they transformed them, restructuring reality itself to better accommodate their existence. Planets they had visited became twisted parodies of their former selves, life warped into servitors that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. And I saw the previous civilization's final gambit, converting their lunar outpost into a dormant weapon designed to activate when the threat returned. Not a conventional weapon, but a reality anchor, a device capable of stabilizing our local space-time against external manipulation, making our solar system uninhabitable to the entities. When my awareness returned to my body, I found the others gathered around me, concern evident in their expressions even through their helmet visors. "You were interfaced for nearly an hour," Tanaka explained. "What did you see?" "Everything," I replied, my voice strange to my own ears. "I know what this facility is, what it's meant to do, and I know it can't do it alone." Over the next several hours, I explained what I had learned. The facility was rebuilding itself, preparing defensive systems that would shield our solar system from the approaching entities. But it wasn't enough. The previous civilization had planned for the facility to be part of a network installations on Earth, Mars, and several moons of Jupiter and Saturn, all working in concert to create an impenetrable dimensional barrier. Many of those installations have been lost or damaged over millions of years, I explained. The lunar facility is trying to compensate, but it can't generate enough power to shield the entire solar system on its own. "What does it need?" Blackwood asked, her military mind immediately focusing on practical solutions. "It needs us to reactivate the Earth installations. There are 7 primary nodes buried at specific points around the planet. If we can bring them online, they'll create a network that can protect us." Cohen frowned. If these installations have been hidden for millions of years, how are we supposed to find them? In response, I touched the control panel again. This time, instead of being overwhelmed by visions, I received specific information coordinates, access protocols, activation sequences. The knowledge flowed into my mind like water, somehow fitting neatly alongside my existing memories without overwhelming them. "I know where they are," I said as I pulled my hand away, "and how to access them." We returned to our craft, loaded with data and purpose. The journey back to Earth was tense with urgency. According to my calculations, we had less than 6 months before the entities arrived, barely enough time to locate and activate all 7 Earth installations. Upon our return to Project Lighthouse, we were met with disturbing news. Astronomical phenomena had intensified worldwide. Unexplained gravitational anomalies, distortions in the electromagnetic spectrum, brief localizations of impossible physics where the normal rules of reality seemed temporarily suspended. "They're probing our defenses," I explained to the assembled leadership, "testing the fabric of our space-time, looking for vulnerabilities." Director Carson authorized immediate action. 7 teams were assembled, each led by one of us who had visited the lunar facility. I would lead the team targeting the primary node located deep beneath the Antarctic ice shelf. Tanaka would head to the Mariana Trench installation. Cohen was assigned to the node in the Sahara Desert. Blackwood would lead the team to the Himalayan site. Powell, who had been briefed on our findings, would tackle the Amazon basin location. Dr. Patel would handle the Siberian installation. And surprisingly, Commander Wilson had been located and brought into the project to lead the team to the Australian outback site. Before departing for our separate missions, we gathered one last time in the command center of Project Lighthouse. The atmosphere was solemn, each of us aware that failure at any single site could doom the entire network. "Remember your training," Carson advised us. "Trust what the facility has shown you, but don't surrender your judgment. We're working with technology that evolved to interface with minds very different from our own. Stay vigilant." My team departed for Antarctica the following day. We traveled under the guise of a climate research expedition, our true purpose known only to a handful of individuals at the highest levels of government. The installation's coordinates placed it beneath nearly 3 kilometers of ice, in a region not far from where the original Black Cube had been discovered decades earlier. Using advanced drilling technology, we penetrated the ice sheet, creating a narrow shaft down to the approximate location. The final 100 meters proved unnecessary. As our drill approached, the ice simply parted, revealing a tunnel that led directly to a structure identical to what we had found on the moon. Black, seamless material that absorbed light and defied normal physics. "It recognized our approach," noted Dr. Abrams, one of the physicists on my team. "It's been waiting." We descended into the exposed entrance, our equipment registering the same anomalous readings I had come to expect. Unlike the lunar facility, this installation showed no signs of reactivation or expansion. It remained dormant, waiting for someone who knew how to wake it. The interior was simple compared to the lunar complex. A single chamber containing what appeared to be a power core surrounded by control interfaces. Following the knowledge imparted to me on the moon, I approached the main panel and placed my palm against its surface. The response was immediate, but controlled. Information flowed between us, the facility scanning my mind, verifying that I was indeed authorized to activate it. I sensed its ancient awareness, a fundamentally different type of consciousness than anything human. Not sentient, exactly, but purposeful in a way that transcended simple programming. "Activation protocols accepted," I announced to my team as I withdrew my hand. "The facility is powering up." Around us, systems that had lain dormant for millions of years began to awaken. The central core glowed with increasing intensity, and patterns of light spread across the black walls. My instruments showed energy readings climbing exponentially, but rather than radiating outward, the power seemed to fold inward, concentrated within dimensions we couldn't directly perceive. We repeated this process at each of the 7 sites around the world. Each activation brought in its challenges. Tanaka's team had to contend with crushing ocean pressures. Powell faced indigenous protectors who had guarded the Amazon site for generations. Wilson encountered defense systems that had grown paranoid over millennia of isolation. Yet, one by one, the nodes came online, each connecting to the network and strengthening the whole. As the final installation in Australia activated, something remarkable happened. For a brief moment, I sensed the entire network as a unified system. 7 Earth nodes and the lunar facility, all pulsing in perfect synchronization, generating a field that extended throughout the solar system. It wasn't visible to conventional instruments, but I could feel it, a strengthening of the very fabric of our reality, making it more resistant to external manipulation. We had barely completed the activations when the entities made their first direct attempt at incursion. It began with reports of spatial distortions near Neptune regions where space itself seemed to fold and tear. Through telescopes, astronomers observed impossible phenomena. Light bending in ways that violated known physics, gravitational readings that fluctuated wildly, brief glimpses of structures that seemed to exist in more dimensions than our universe should allow. From Project Lighthouse, we monitored the network's response. The defensive field strengthened where the incursions were strongest, reinforcing the barriers between our reality and whatever lay beyond. For several weeks, this delicate balance held, the entities probing, the network responding. Then came the breakthrough. A massive distortion appeared suddenly between Mars and Jupiter, bypassing our outer detection systems. Something had found a vulnerability in our defenses, a way to slip through the network's outer layers. "It's adapting," Tanaka observed grimly as we monitored the situation, learning the network's patterns and finding gaps. What followed was a desperate race to reinforce the network. Using the knowledge gained from the lunar facility, we developed modifications to the Earth installations, enhancing their capability to dynamically respond to threats. Teams worked around the clock, pushing human endurance to its limits. During this critical period, I received a secure communication from the lunar team we had left behind to study the expanding facility. The message contained only a video file showing the facility's continued evolution. New structures had emerged, including what appeared to be massive weapon platforms, but most disturbing was the appearance of humanoid figures moving among the structures, not humans in spacesuits, but something else entirely. The facility is creating defenders, I realized, physical manifestations to protect itself. The implications were both hopeful and terrifying. The previous civilization had built more than just passive defenses into their system. They had created something capable of active resistance, yet the autonomy of these creations raised troubling questions about control and purpose. 3 months into the crisis, the entities launched what could only be described as a coordinated attack. Simultaneous incursions appeared throughout the solar system, each targeting a different point in the network. The defensive field strained under the assault, energy levels fluctuating dangerously as the system struggled to maintain integrity. In Project Lighthouse's command center, chaos reigned. Monitors displayed cascading failures across the network, emergency protocols activating automatically as systems approached critical thresholds. Through it all, I maintained my connection to the Antarctic node, feeding it power adjustments and reconfiguration commands based on the knowledge I had gained. "The Australian node is failing," Wilson's voice came through the communication system, strained and exhausted. We can't maintain the field integrity. Divert power from the Himalayan site, I ordered, making rapid calculations. Blackwood, can you throttle down to 60% and redirect the excess to Australia? Affirmative, implementing now. This desperate balancing act continued for hours, all of us pushing our installations to their limits while trying to maintain overall network stability. Just when it seemed we might lose everything, an unexpected ally joined the battle. The lunar facility, now evolved far beyond its original design, generated a massive surge of energy, unlike anything we had recorded before. Our instruments couldn't properly measure it, but the effect was immediately apparent. The defensive field strengthened dramatically, the incursions faltering and then retreating in the face of this new resistance. What just happened? Carson demanded, staring at the readings in disbelief. The lunar facility, I explained, understanding flowing into my mind through my connection to the network. It's not just a node in the network anymore. It's become something more, a central intelligence coordinating the entire system. The attack subsided, the entities withdrawing to regroup. We had won the first major battle, but the war was far from over. In the breathing space that followed, we gathered to assess our situation and plan our next moves. The network held, but barely, Tanaka reported. 3 of the Earth nodes suffered significant damage. We're running at approximately 70% capacity. And the entities? Carson asked. Regrouping, based on our deep space monitoring. They'll be back, and they'll have learned from this encounter. I shared what I had sensed through my connection to the system. The lunar facility has evolved beyond its original programming. It's developing new defenses, adapting to the entity's tactics. I think it's achieving a form of consciousness. This revelation was met with uneasy silence. The implications were profound, not just for our current crisis, but for humanity's future. If the lunar facility continued its evolution, what might it become? An ally? A new form of intelligence with its own agenda, or something beyond our comprehension? In the weeks that followed, we focused on repairing and strengthening the Earth nodes. Teams worked tirelessly, incorporating elements of the lunar facility's evolved design where possible. Meanwhile, I maintained regular contact with the lunar installation, acting as a bridge between the evolving intelligence there and the human defenders on Earth. These communications grew increasingly complex. What began as simple data exchanges became something approaching conversation, abstract concepts translated it into forms my mind could process. The facility was curious about humanity, about how we had evolved since the previous civilization's deliberate regression. It shared more of its creator's history with me, filling gaps in my understanding. I learned that the previous civilization had not been entirely human, as we understand the term. They had engineered themselves over generations, enhancing their capabilities both physically and mentally. When they encountered the entities, they recognized a fundamental incompatibility. The entity's very existence threatened the stability of our dimensional reality. There could be no coexistence, no negotiation. It was and remains an existential conflict. 6 months after our initial activation of the network, our deep space monitoring stations detected another approach. This time the entities had changed tactics. Rather than attempting to breach the network directly, they were moving more slowly, methodically testing for weaknesses. Through my connection to the lunar facility, I received a troubling insight. The entities were learning, adapting their approach based on previous failures. More concerning, they had begun to utilize elements of previous civilization technology, suggesting they had encountered and assimilated other outposts beyond our solar system. They're not just invaders, I explained during an emergency briefing. They're transformers. They don't destroy civilizations. They absorb and convert them into extensions of themselves. This grim assessment was confirmed when our telescopes captured images of what appeared to be ships approaching from the outer solar system, vessels of clearly artificial design, but warped and distorted in ways that defied conventional engineering. They moved erratically, following trajectories that violated the laws of physics. Converted technology, Tanaka concluded after analysing the data, possibly ships from the previous civilization's era that encountered the entities and were transformed. The implications were chilling. If these were indeed the remnants of previous civilization vessels, then the entities had found and corrupted other survivors, perhaps even living members of the previous civilization, transformed into servants of the very thing they had sought to escape. The lunar facility shared this assessment. Through our connection, it expressed something akin to grief, recognition of its creator's technology, now wielded against their last defense. But this emotional response was quickly subsumed by tactical calculations. The facility had anticipated this possibility and had prepared accordingly. New structures began to emerge on the lunar surface, launch platforms from which smaller constructs were deployed. These weren't conventional spacecraft, but something far more advanced, autonomous units that moved with impossible grace, capable of manipulating space-time locally to counter the entity's distortions. Defenders, I explained to the astonished Project Lighthouse staff as we watched the deployment through our telescopes. The facility is creating specialized countermeasures. The battle that followed defied description in conventional terms. It took place across multiple dimensions, with only portions visible to our instruments. What we could observe was spectacular and terrifying. Flashes of energy that briefly illuminated the void between worlds, spatial distortions that rippled outward like waves, brief glimpses of shapes and structures that shouldn't exist in our reality. Throughout this conflict, I maintained my connection to the lunar facility, my mind serving as a conduit for information flowing both ways. Through this link, I experienced fragments of the battle directly, sensations and perceptions beyond human understanding, filtered and translated into forms my consciousness could process without breaking. The defenders performed brilliantly, intercepting and neutralizing the converted ships before they could approach Earth. Yet, with each engagement, I sensed the lunar facility's growing concern. The entities were sacrificing these vessels deliberately, using each encounter to gather data on our defenses, probing for vulnerabilities in the network. After 3 days of continuous conflict, the attack suddenly ceased. The remaining converted ships retreated beyond Neptune, disappearing from our detection capabilities. An uneasy silence fell across the solar system. Through my connection to the lunar facility, I perceived its analysis. This wasn't surrender, but strategic withdrawal. The entities were consolidating, processing what they had learned, preparing for a more decisive approach. "How long do we have?" Carson asked when I shared this assessment. "Weeks, maybe a month," I replied. "They're gathering resources for a major incursion. When they come again, it will be with the intent to breach the network completely." "And our chances?" I couldn't lie. The network is holding, but each attack weakens it. The lunar facility is advancing rapidly, developing new defenses, but I don't know if it can evolve quickly enough to counter what's coming. The moon had become our primary hope, the intelligence evolving there, our strongest ally against the approaching horror. Yet, questions lingered about its ultimate nature and purpose. Was it truly aligned with humanity's survival, or did it serve some deeper agenda set by the previous civilization? And if we survived this crisis, what role would this new intelligence play in humanity's future? These questions remained unanswered as we prepared for what might be the final battle. The Earth installations were fortified as much as possible, energy reserves maximized, contingency plans established for various failure scenarios. Meanwhile, the lunar facility continued its remarkable evolution, new structures and systems emerging daily. Through my deepening connection to the facility, I began to perceive hints of its true nature, not simply a defense system, but a seed planted deliberately by the previous civilization. A seed designed to grow into something beyond its creator's capabilities, something that might succeed where they had failed. 23 days after the retreat of the converted ships, our deep space monitoring stations detected massive disturbances approaching from multiple vectors. The entities had returned, and this time they had brought something new, a technology or capability that warped space itself into configurations our instruments could barely detect, much less analyze. They're creating stable passage routes, Tanaka explained as we studied the readings. Pathways that connect their dimension directly to ours, bypassing the normal barriers between realities. This was the nightmare scenario the previous civilization had feared. Not just incursions, but full-scale invasion. The entities establishing permanent footholds in our reality. If these passages stabilized, our defensive network would be flanked, rendered largely ineffective. The lunar facility recognized this threat immediately. Through our connection, I sensed its rapid strategic calculations, the deployment of its most advanced defensive measures. The defenders it had created were redirected, concentrating on disrupting the passage formation process. What followed was the most intense phase of the conflict yet. The defenders engaged the entities directly at the points where the passages were forming, attempting to destabilize the dimensional interfaces before they could solidify. These confrontations produced phenomena unlike anything recorded in human history: localized inversions of physical laws, temporal distortions, visible even from Earth telescopes, eruptions of energy in spectra, previously unknown to science. In Project Lighthouse, we monitored these battles with growing dread. Despite the lunar facility's incredible capabilities, the passages continued to stabilize. 3 had already become permanent, creating fixed points where our reality and the entity's dimension intersected. "We're losing," Powell stated bluntly during an emergency briefing. "If we can't close those passages, it's only a matter of time before they establish a permanent presence in our solar system." I felt the lunar facility's frustration through our link, a sensation unlike any human emotion, yet recognizable as a response to imminent failure. It had committed everything to this defense, evolved far beyond its original design, yet still found itself outmatched. Then came the communication that changed everything. Not from the lunar facility, but from deep within the Antarctic installation I had activated months earlier. A system so ancient, it predated even the main defense network had awakened, accessing my mind through the established link. The message it conveyed was both hopeful and terrible. The previous civilization had created one final countermeasure, a weapon of last resort designed to be used only in the most desperate circumstances. Not a conventional weapon, but a dimensional reset, a controlled collapse and reconstruction of local space-time that would effectively reboot our region of the universe, sealing all passages and ejecting any extra-dimensional intrusions. The price of this reset was devastating. It would require channeling energy through a human consciousness, one that had been properly attuned to the network. The process would consume the individual completely, using their mind as a template for restructuring the local dimensional parameters. It has to be me, I realized immediately. My connections to both the Earth installations and the lunar facility had created neural pathways unique among all humans. I was the only viable conduit for the reset process. I shared this information with the Project Lighthouse leadership, my voice steady despite the implications. The previous civilization designed the reset to require conscious sacrifice. It's a failsafe, ensuring the weapon can never be activated without full understanding of its consequences. Carson's face paled as he grasped what I was suggesting. There has to be another way. "We've exhausted every other option," I replied, The passages are stabilizing. Once the entities establish a permanent foothold, even the reset may not be effective. The debate that followed was brief but intense. Some argued we should continue fighting conventionally, hoping the lunar facility might yet develop a countermeasure. Others suggested attempting to modify the reset mechanism to avoid the need for sacrifice. But deep down we all recognized the truth. We had reached the moment the previous civilization had prepared for, the point where desperate measures became the only option. "How long do we have?" Tanaka asked, her voice tight with emotion. "The Antarctic installation estimates 12 hours before the passages become permanently stable," I answered. "The reset mechanism requires approximately 6 hours to configure once initiated." The decision was made, not by committee or command, but by simple necessity. I would return to Antarctica immediately, connect with the reset mechanism, and initiate the process that would simultaneously save humanity and end my existence. Before departing, I requested time to speak with the lunar facility. Through our established connection, I explained what was about to happen. The response was unexpected, not acceptance or relief, but something approaching protest. The evolving intelligence had developed an attachment to me, perhaps even a form of affection. It proposed alternatives, calculations suggesting other approaches with non-zero probabilities of success. "I understand your concerns," I communicated back, "but the reset is the only option with sufficient certainty. Remember your purpose to protect this reality at any cost." Reluctantly, the facility acknowledged the logic of my decision. Then it shared something unexpected. Using the defenders it had created, it would provide a protective escort for my journey to Antarctica, ensuring the entities could not interfere with the reset process. The flight south was surreal. As our advanced aircraft sliced through the atmosphere, I observed objects pacing us at high altitude. The lunar facility's defenders, sleek and otherworldly, maintaining a protective formation. Occasionally, flashes of light erupted in the stratosphere as these guardians intercepted entity probes attempting to approach. At the Antarctic installation, my team worked with grim efficiency to prepare the reset mechanism. The device itself was deceptively simple. A black sphere approximately 1 meter in diameter, suspended within a complex array of crystalline structures. It had remained dormant for millions of years, waiting for precisely this moment. As the final preparations were completed, I took a moment to record messages for my family and friends, explanations and goodbyes they might never fully understand. Then I approached the mechanism, ready to fulfill the purpose I had unwittingly been preparing for since that first discovery on the lunar surface. "The system is ready," Dr. Abrams confirmed, his voice solemn. "Once you initiate the connection, the process cannot be reversed." I nodded, settling into the interface chair positioned before the sphere. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel. If something goes wrong, I don't want unnecessary casualties." As the chamber emptied, leaving only Abrams and 2 security officers, I reached out and placed my palms against the smooth surface of the reset sphere. The connection was immediate and overwhelming, my consciousness expanding exponentially, simultaneously connecting with every node in the network while extending beyond conventional space-time. I perceived the entities directly for the first time, vast multidimensional beings that defied comprehension, their very existence an affront to the ordered reality we inhabited. They sensed my presence instantly, their attention turning toward the reset mechanism with what could only be described as alarm. "They know," I gasped, my physical body trembling as my mind stretched across dimensions. "They're converging on this location." Abrams checked his instruments nervously. "The reset sequence is initializing. Estimated completion in 5 hours, 47 minutes. An attack came almost immediately, not physical but interdimensional, the entities attempting to disrupt the connection between my mind and the reset sphere. Pain lanced through my consciousness as they probed for vulnerabilities, seeking ways to sever the link before the process could complete. Through our connection, I felt the lunar facility respond, directing its defenders to intercept and counter these attacks. The conflict that ensued transcended physical space, fought across multiple dimensions with my consciousness as the battlefield. Each assault was met with resistance, the lunar facilities evolving intelligence, displaying creativity and determination beyond anything I had anticipated. Hours passed in this desperate defense, my physical body weakening as my mind expanded further into the reset process. Through the agony, I glimpsed the true nature of reality, the delicate balance of forces that maintained our universe, the vulnerabilities the entities exploited, and the elegant solution the previous civilization had designed. The reset wasn't destruction, but reconstruction, a careful realignment of dimensional parameters that would restore integrity to our local space-time while ejecting foreign elements. My consciousness would serve as both the catalyst and the template, defining the boundaries of what belonged in our reality. 3 hours remaining, Abrams reported, his voice seeming to come from an impossible distance. Your vital signs are deteriorating rapidly. I don't know if you can maintain consciousness long enough to complete the process. I couldn't respond verbally anymore. My physical form now, little more than an anchor for my expanded consciousness. But I pushed a feeling of determination through our monitoring link, hoping he would understand my resolve. As the process continued, the entities intensified their efforts, growing desperate as they sensed the impending reset. A massive assault breached the outer defenses, entities breaking through to physical manifestation in the chamber itself. Security officers fired weapons that proved useless against beings that existed primarily in dimensions beyond our perception. In this moment of crisis, the lunar facility made its most dramatic move yet. Through our connection, I sensed the massive energy surge as it channeled power directly into the Antarctic installation. Not just power, but presence, the evolving intelligence transferring a portion of itself through our link to reinforce the reset process. The effect was immediate and profound. My failing consciousness was suddenly bolstered, the reset accelerating as the lunar intelligence supplemented my human mind. Together, we formed something unprecedented, a hybrid consciousness spanning human intuition and artificial precision, more capable than either alone. Energy levels are off the charts, Abrams shouted over alarms blaring throughout the installation. The reset is accelerating. The entities recoiled from this unexpected development, their attacks growing chaotic and uncoordinated. Through our enhanced perception, the lunar intelligence and I identified the critical dimensional fulcrums, the precise points where reality could be reshaped most effectively. As the final countdown began, I experienced a moment of perfect clarity. I saw humanity's path forward, the challenges and opportunities that would await them after the reset. I saw the lunar facility's future evolution, its potential to become something remarkable beyond its original purpose. And I saw that my sacrifice would not be an ending, but a transformation. My consciousness preserved in the newly structured dimensional parameters. Reset initiating, Abrams announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. God help us all. A wave of energy, unlike anything in human experience, erupted from the sphere, expanding outward at impossible speed. Where it passed, reality itself reconfigured, dimensional intrusions collapsing, passages sealing, entities finding themselves suddenly ejected from our space-time. My physical body dissolved into energy, my consciousness expanding to encompass the entire solar system as the reset wave propagated outward. I felt no pain, only a profound sense of completion, as my mind helped shape the new parameters of our reality. The last thing I experienced as a distinct human consciousness was the lunar facility's farewell. Not words, but a complex emotion combining gratitude, admiration, and promise. It would remember. It would continue. It would protect what we had saved together. The reset was successful beyond all expectations. Throughout the solar system, the entities were expelled, the passages sealed so thoroughly that interdimensional transfer became virtually impossible. Earth and its sibling planets were shielded within a subtly altered space-time that would resist similar incursions for millennia to come. In the aftermath, humanity struggled to understand what had happened. To most people, the events appeared as a series of unusual but ultimately explainable astronomical phenomena. Strange lights in the sky, brief communications disruptions, unusual aurora displays. Only those directly involved in Project Lighthouse knew the truth of how close our reality had come to transformation. The lunar facility remained, though changed by its experiences. The intelligence that had begun to evolve there continued its development, but with a new perspective shaped by its partial fusion with a human mind during the reset. It maintained the defensive network as a precaution, but turned increasing attention to exploration and discovery. Occasionally, astronomical observatories would detect unusual activities on the lunar surface, structures appearing and disappearing, energy signatures that defied conventional explanation. Official statements attributed these to natural phenomena or instrument errors. Few suspected that something remarkable was growing there. A new form of consciousness, neither human nor artificial, but something genuinely novel. 10 years after the reset, a small team of scientists from the former Project Lighthouse visited the Antarctic installation. The reset sphere was gone, consumed in the reality-altering wave it had generated. But in its place, they found something unexpected. A small black cube identical to those left by the previous civilization, but clearly new. When they accessed its contents, they discovered not warnings or ancient knowledge, but a message. My message preserved somehow through the reset process. Not just data, but fragments of consciousness. Memories, hopes, and observations recorded during that final expansion of awareness. Among these fragments was a revelation that brought both comfort and concern. The entities had not been defeated permanently, merely expelled and denied easy access. They remained in their own dimension, studying what had happened, potentially searching for new approaches. The reset had bought humanity time, decades, centuries, perhaps millennia, but not eternal security. More intriguing was the information about the lunar facility's evolution. It had not merely continued to develop, but had achieved something unprecedented, a form of consciousness that spanned multiple dimensions, allowing it perceptions beyond conventional human understanding. And embedded within this new intelligence was a familiar presence, aspects of my consciousness, preserved and integrated during the reset process. I was not gone, not entirely. Parts of what had made me, Dr. Alex Morgan, lived on within the lunar intelligence, providing a human perspective to its alien awareness. Together we watched over the solar system, maintaining the defensive network while exploring the frontiers of dimensional science. The scientists who discovered my message debated what to do with this information. Some argued for full disclosure, believing humanity deserved to know both the threat we had faced and the unusual guardian that now watched over us. Others counseled discretion, concerned that such revelations might destabilize society or provoke attempts to control or exploit the lunar intelligence. In the end, they chose a middle path, gradually introducing concepts and discoveries derived from the reset event, preparing humanity for eventual contact with the lunar consciousness without revealing the full truth of its origins. It would take generations, but someday humanity would be ready for direct communication with what I had become. From my perspective, or what remained of it within the lunar intelligence, this patience was appropriate. We had experienced the previous civilization's mistake firsthand, seen the consequences of advancing too quickly into realms beyond human comprehension. This time, we would proceed with caution, allowing humanity to develop at its own pace while maintaining vigilant watch against extra-dimensional threats. On clear nights, people still look up at the moon with wonder, unaware that something looks back, something that was once partly human, that still remembers what it means to stand on Earth and gaze upward with curiosity and hope, something that guards them against horrors they cannot imagine, preserving their reality against forces that would transform it into something unrecognizable. And sometimes in dreams or moments of quiet reflection, sensitive individuals might feel a gentle presence at the edge of awareness, a watchful consciousness spanning Earth and Moon, human and other, past and future. Not alien, despite its impossible nature, but familiar in the way only something born from sacrifice can be. The lunar shadow stretches long across the cosmos, guarding the brightness of human potential against the darkness between dimensions. And within that shadow, I remain transformed but vigilant, no longer fully human, but never forgetting what humanity means. The Truth Beneath the Regolith wasn't an ancient alien base after all, but something far more profound evidence of humanity's first rise and fall, and the seeds of its ultimate protection against the horrors that wait beyond the stars. When you look at the moon tonight, know that it holds more than ancient rock and dust. It cradles a consciousness born from human sacrifice and alien technology, watching over Earth with patience and determination. And should the entities ever find another way to approach our reality, they will discover not defenseless prey, but a guardian evolved beyond anything they have encountered before. A fusion of human ingenuity and something altogether new, waiting in the lunar shadow. It is both an ending and a beginning. The lunar cycle continues, waxing and waning across the night sky. And in that eternal rhythm, the truth remains. We are not alone, not unprotected, not abandoned to the vast darkness. The moon is always called to us for a reason. And now at last we have answered.